Hey everybody, it is noon on a Thursday, and you're hearing Prince playing. I do not own the rights to any of this music, and we're gonna cut this out as soon as possible. It's called Cinnamon Girl. It's one of my favorite Prince songs from Musicology. So anyway, we're getting started. I'm gonna wait for some people to join us, and then we will lay into it. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today, and I want to make sure we get to it all. Um, but it's been an interesting week, very interesting week, and there's some stuff that I meant to get to last week that I didn't get to, so I'm gonna try to get to that this week. Right? So let's cut the music out. Hey, hey, Nay, how are you? Hey. So, as you can see from my cup, or if you can see the cup here, today is my anniversary. I have been married 14 years now, and she has not killed me yet. Um, but the day is still young. So, so we're going to get into that a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about, um, just being married in general, and what that takes, and what where where we're going, and what we do, and how we stay married. Um, my wife posted a funny post about being in entanglement. Is that what it's called? Um, a la the Will and Jada kind of thing. And so the interesting thing about that is that everybody's marriage is different, and Will and Jada have been a topic of marriage for quite some time now, and so it is always very interesting whenever something happens in their marriage, and everybody starts to look around and it's like, oh well, how does that relate to my marriage? How or do we have a Will and Jada type marriage? And it's like, no, y'all don't. Everybody's marriage is different. But I do wanted to I do want to have a conversation about a couple of different things before we get into the whole marriage thing. Um, and I forgot to talk about this last week. We are still in the midst of a pandemic. We are still dealing with all of the things that are happening throughout the country, and um, for the most part, New York City is back to uh, close to normal. Let me rephrase that. New York City is no longer in dire straits when it comes to the pandemic, right? So, a couple of days ago, we had zero deaths from coronavirus. Our numbers, our daily 3 day average is low. So we are back at the point where we it's not the thing that is driving our every thought and our everything. Everybody should still be careful, but the glasses are darkening up. I can't even see myself. We should still be careful, but we are not at where we were before. We were at a place where there, you know, you every day you heard about somebody who you knew or were close to, or somebody who um, was close to somebody that was close to you was passing away, and so we're not there anymore. I tell you who is there though: Florida and Texas and Arizona. All the people who we told them, and this is documented because Cuomo got on his podcast on his broadcast every single week and said, we're just simply the first city that's going through this. We're simply the first people who have to deal with this. And everybody was like, "Oh, y'all are, what's going on up there in New York? Y'all are horrible. Y'all are crazy." I was like, "Okay, yeah, we have a lot of stuff going on because we have a dense population here in New York City. But that doesn't mean that it won't happen somewhere else, right?" So So lo and behold, we have everything under control. And now we have these states. We have all of these states that are like really spiraling out of control. I saw a meme the other day that said um, that. Oh man, I lost it. It was really interesting, but it spoke to the fact that at one point in time we were in New York City we were shutting stuff down at one level, and Florida is that's what it was. When we had a certain level of deaths and hospitalizations, we shut our entire city down. In Florida, they opened up Disney World, right? And so there is a real disconnect with what is actually happening, the science, and the politicizing of the whole coronavirus thing. As you know, Dr. Fauci, who was uh, the go-to guy for the Trump administration, has now become the villain in the story, as per Hamilton, right? So, speaking of Hamilton, we're going to get to that too. So it's it's crazy because America didn't listen when Europe was saying certain things, right? We're like, oh, okay, this is a bad thing. We should shut our stuff down. We didn't listen then. We didn't pay attention then. And then it happened in America, and we were one of the hot spots. Los Angeles and California was another one of the hot spots, and we did what we needed to do in order to get it under control, and we got it under control. And then the rest of the country didn't listen to us. Like, who are you going to listen to? Like, we showed you exactly what was needed to be done in order to lower the amount of deaths, the amount of infections, and nobody listened. So the thing that I wanted to bring up, the thing that bothered me the most was um, last week. The governor said, well, not just last week, but a couple of weeks ago, the governor said that if you are coming from these certain what do you call it, states, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks before you come to New York State. Or when you come to New York State, you have to quarantine before you walk out and about in our city. Which makes sense, right? Because there are spikes in all of these other states, and if we're going to get this thing under control over the country, uh, we need to have some sort of regulation. We need to have some sort of control. So he said all of these states needed to be. If you're coming from these states, you needed to be quarantined. I looked on Twitter. He posted this on his Twitter, and I looked on Twitter, and he was the subject of so much vitriol. So much vitriol. Everybody jumped at him. It's like nobody want to come to New York City. They're killing people up there. And all of a sudden, New York City was the place where you wanted to avoid with a 10-foot pole. Really? We're gonna play this game that nobody wants to come to New York City, right? We're gonna come play this game that nobody wants to be in New York City when we finally open back up. We're gonna play that game? Because if that's the case, y'all, and I have people who are listening who are from outside of New York City. If we want to play that game, then we can play the game where y'all can just stay where y'all are at, right? Because at this point in time, if we're going to get this whole thing under control, people need to stay where they're at to begin with. But if y'all want to act like we're shooting people in the streets, like everybody, like you walk down the street and everybody's getting shot, and it's the wild, wild west, don't believe the hype, right? Do not believe the hype. The incidences of gun violence in New York City are up more than they were last year. But we are talking about like if we're talking about over the course of a week, we're talking about 10 to 15 people being injured by gun violence, right? And it's a city of 8.5 million people. So clearly, not everybody's getting shot up in the streets. Also, the gun violence in New York City is probably linked to the fact that people have been indoors for a very long time. And I was telling my family the other day, it's like it might be as simple as, man, I had a beef with you in June. I had a beef with you in March. I haven't seen you since March. We're going to settle this right now. It might be as simple as that. So I can't say for sure. There's also the suspicion that because people are talking about defund the police, that the police are like, well, if you don't want us around, here, go ahead and take care of policing your own neighborhoods on your own, and are just sitting back and twiddling their thumbs until it's time for them to ride in on a white horse and save the day. And that's a conspiracy theory. I don't know how far away from the truth it is, though, but that's the bottom line of what's going on. Um, but I think it's hilarious that people outside of New York City are talking about New York City like it's such a horrible place to visit. And because Governor Cuomo said that y'all people who are in states that are having spikes need to stay away, or when you get here, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks, that people are completely flabbergasted by how he could say something so egregious. I don't know what else there is to explain to people. This is serious. People are dying. People are being hospitalized. And I also saw a news report the other day where we focus on the deaths a lot, right? We focus on how many people die from this disease. But what we don't focus on is the fact that if you get it, there are ramifications that are just as, not as bad as death, but close to being dead, right? So there are cognitive impairment residuals from having the coronavirus. There are people who have permanent respiratory damage. There are people who never really recover from this, right? And so even if you get over it and you're no longer infected, you still have the side effects of having gotten this. So if we talk about how many people have died, which at this point in time, it's 133,000 people, right? 133,000 people have died from this thing, and people are still not taking it seriously. So that's number one. Number two, if we then extrapolate out from, well, what about the people that didn't die but were seriously ill that had to get on respirators? We're talking about even more thousands of people. Um, and then the numbers, I don't know where the person got the numbers from, but they seem pretty logical in terms of 600,000, 800,000 people who are negatively affected by this disease. So if you are just talking about the people who have died, you're missing the point. This is a devastating disease. And even if we were just talking about the deaths that are associated with it, that's enough. Cut it out, right? So I don't know. I I am praying that these trials that are going through for the what do you call it, the vaccine, are effective. I am praying that they manage to get a vaccine done as soon as possible, because it is clear that the preventative model and the preventative actions are not going to work in this country, because people are too selfish, and people just don't want to lose their freedoms. And we're the land of the free, so like anytime something attacks our freedoms, everybody gets really really upset about it. So Elizabeth said, I read an article about the cognitive dissonance regarding COVID-19. I'll share it with you. It's a great read. Yes, please share that with me. Um, because for those of you who also know, I am the director of multicultural affairs at Manhattan College, and it is going to be really interesting if and when we get the okay to allow students back on campus, how they're going to deal with what we are asking them to do, and how and what they actually want to do. Right, being on a college campus, and especially those students who are resident students, really means a sense of freedom. And if their freedoms are being infringed upon by this virus, I'm just curious as to what the pushback is going to be. Um, I was talking to one of my fellow administrators, and the hope is that they're about as scared about this as we are, and so they'll just do what they need to do, especially if they're New York City residents or New York State residents, right? Um, but there's always a chance that it's like, look, I've been waiting to get out of the house all summer long, to see my friends and to cavort with my peoples, and I'm not going to pay attention to any of your guidelines because I think that I am, invincible. So we'll see how that plays out. So, as the cup says, today is my anniversary. I 14 years ago was standing in the wings, um, on one of the hottest days in July, um, in Long Island, waiting to see my beautiful bride walk down the aisle. We had an outdoor wedding, and it was blazing hot. I mean, ridiculously hot. Anybody who went to the wedding, the one thing that they remember was that it was super hot that day. And so, um, today is my wedding anniversary, and today is this is 14 years, and so this is my ivory wedding anniversary, and I have a ivory gift for my wife, and she got me a mug, which is beautiful, right? We're not big gift people, in case you're wondering. Like, we don't do like huge. We're more into experiences, um, which brings me to today, which is crazy because we're locked down. We can't go to restaurants. I have something planned, but it is a far cry from the type of things that we normally would do for our anniversary, and so it's bananas, where where the tendrils of this disease and this virus goes to. Um, I was talking to a friend of mine. Was like, this better be over by the time Leo season comes around because Leos are not interested in having a virtual birthday party. We're gonna have to figure something out. You have to figure something out. Anyway, so we've been married 14 years, and we have been together somewhere in the range of 17 years. If you include the dating, um, and we are, our marriage is. Some people look at our marriage and like, oh, y'all look so happy and stuff like that, and we are happy. I love my wife. There are days that she loves me, and it is and we have two beautiful children, and I think that we are doing the best that we can for the people that we are. Um, and people always ask us, well, what is your secret? And the problem is that there is no secret for two reasons. The first reason is that whatever we are doing is we didn't invent it, right? So we are taking cues from other people. We are taking cues from uh, like what do you call it? Uh, what's that thing called? Experts, actual people who have studied marriages. We take advice from them as well. Um, and the other thing is that the other piece of that is that uh, it's not a secret because what works for us may not work for you, right? And what works for our marriage may not work for your marriage. And so I want to, this is where we come back to, we come back to the whole Will and Jada thing. And so Will and Jada, and I just saw that, Nay, yes, y'all gave me ideas like going to the Ivory Coast. It was like, this don't work. There was a bunch of ideas that just didn't work, or it would just take a little bit way too. It was too late in the game to have to plan for it. Anyway, So, we go back to the whole Will and Jada thing, and everybody is like getting all butthurt about what happened with Will and Jada and August and the entanglement. And so I get it. I understand completely where how people are feeling about. It's like, oh man, this seems crazy. That how could they allow that in their marriage? It doesn't seem it doesn't seem like they really love each other or something to that effect. Here's the thing: the operative term of how could they allow that in their marriage is the phrase their marriage, right? It's their marriage. And so if Will and J and so everybody knows that there are a number of different ways that people are doing marriage things, right? So like there are people who have open relationships. There are people who are swingers. There are people who are in monogamous relationships, and then there are people who have breaks in their marriage. Like everybody does it differently, and it's what works for them. There are people who are very liberal in the way that they interact with their mate and how they and their mate interact with the rest of the world. It's very different. Will and Jada for a long time um, were the I guess the secret Illuminati open marriage celebrity couple, right? And so a lot of people were like, "Oh well, like, look, Will and Jada, they're making it work, and they allow people into their marriage, and they have other kind of relationships, and like, but now when it's actually proven that there was is out there that they've had a tryst and Will apparently had a tryst. I did not watch the red table. I will tell you this right now. I allowed myself to watch certain parts of it, so I needed to know why everybody was using this particular word. But that works for them. But they're also celebrities, right? They're also people who have millions and millions of dollars and are in the public eye and probably don't have the same lifestyles that you and I do, right? I think that everybody's marriage needs to have its own set of rules, and of course, if they're not breaking the rules of the law of the land, everybody's marriage has to have its own set of rules. And Nigeria says, like, how do I feel about the statement that marriage is hard work? I have said this from the beginning. Uh, Marriage and love is a constant work in progress. You have to constantly figure out what it means to be married for you. You have to constantly figure out how you are um, adding to this idea of being together with one person for the rest of your life. Because what worked, and here's the other piece, right? Because what worked when you first got married probably doesn't work now, 14 years in, 20 years in. And so if you are under the misconception that you are the same person that you were 14 years ago, and therefore your wife or your mate is the same person that they were 14 years ago, you're already losing. Right? We change as people. We change as a couple. We change as roles in our relationship. And then if you factor into children, there's a whole bunch of other things that will have changed about your relationship. And I think one of the fatal flaws, well, two of the fatal flaws, is that people think that what got them there is enough to keep them there and that they don't have to work at it. It is absolutely hard work. It is absolutely something that you have to be intentional about, because it's not just going to take care of itself. Marriage does not just take care of itself. You don't wake up every single morning and look across at your mate and go, all right, I still love her. We're in a good marriage. It doesn't work that way, right? Sometimes you wake up and she can't stand the sight of you. Sometimes I wake up and I can't stand the sight of her. And you go through those days and try to figure out what that trigger was. What made you feel that way? and you work through it. There are days that I am enraptured by the sight of my wife, right? And that's pretty much almost every day. Um, but there are also those days that I'm like, you know what, I need to be alone. And you have to recognize those feelings and give credence to those feelings. There's an old saying, never go to bed angry. And I think what that is trying to get to is that you have to communicate what is bothering you and communicate how you are feeling at that moment. But it also gives this falsehood that you can figure out and solve whatever the issue is in the course of one night, right? I remember when we were a young couple, we would have, we'd have gotten angry at each other over something, and we would have what are called midnight caucuses because we were believing in this whole never go to bed angry. And so we would try to go to bed. We would try to solve these problems before we go to bed. And so we'd be up until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, just hammering this through. And it's like, all right, we're not going to solve this tonight. And we might have to go to bed angry. And I think that statement is a little bit dangerous because it makes it feel like, all right, if you have one night of anger, then your whole marriage is falling apart. I think that you have to be married to your best friend, and there are many of us who have best friends who we have breaks with, and then when we come back together, it's as if we had never separated. Sometimes people need space. Sometimes people need time to work this out in their own minds, and sometimes people need the time to understand their own feelings until they're ready to come in and have a conversation. There's also the reality of not having conversations in the midst of anger, and so if you're angry about something, the chances for you to say something that you will regret and not be able to take back are higher until you get to a point where you are calm and you are more rational with your thoughts and your words. And so I think that there are a couple of different hints. Number one is it's work, right? And the number two, or 1A, is um, the work that you put in at the beginning of the relationship may not look like the work that you need to put in now, right? So, at the beginning of our relationship, our main focus was trying to be as um, uh, eh, spontaneous and inventive and creative as we possibly could, because we weren't entrapped by anything, right? So we didn't have a house, we didn't have the worries of of child rearing, and so we could be as free and as expressive as we wanted to. I'm not going to tell you how that manifested itself because this is a public forum and I don't want to get shut down by Facebook. But once we started to move forward, and there were other things that we needed to take care of, there are different ways that we have to work at things. Like, for instance, we're parents, and one of the things that we have to work at is making sure that in addition to being parents, that we are a couple, that we are mates to each other. And so I make a conscientious effort to make sure that my wife knows that she's my wife, not just the mother to my children. And she does the same thing for me, because it is very easy. This is one of the biggest problems that a lot of parents have, is that you become co-parents and forget that you are also members of a relationship. And that's huge, right? Because it is very hard to parent, and it's very easy to get caught up with all of the things that it is necessary in order to, as you can tell, I'm outside, but we're no longer upstate. As you can tell, we're back in Brooklyn. So welcome to the fire engines. Anyway, so it's very easy to become parents and forget about being part of a relationship. So that's one of the biggest things that I have learned. we had a tradition of we would have date nights, and we're going to get back to that. This whole coronavirus has thrown everything off. Plus, we moved into a new house, and it's time for us to get back to that. So we have date nights. We get a babysitter. Fortunately we have grandparents who are more than happy to take the kids or come over and watch the kids, and we go out and have a date. Just Hayden and Aisha. Hayden and Aisha trying to figure out what what makes us tick, right? Enjoying our time, going to a movie, going to a play, going to have dinner, or going to do something else that I'm not going to mention here, right? So the whole point is that we intend on continuing the things that were engaging to us, that attracted each to each other, but also while at the same time maintaining that we are still parents. We also take trips alone, right? We will do at least a long weekend once a year where there are no kids, no encumbrances, and we go do what we want to do. Um, it's important to recenter who you are with your mate, because it it's so easy. This life is so easy for us to move away from each other. I tell my students all the time. They get hot and heavy about like the people that they're around. It's like, this is my friend for life, and especially when I'm talking to like high school students. This is my friend for life. They're gonna be around me forever, and I'm like, I have a good group of high school friends that I still keep in contact with, but most of the people that I thought were going to be around me for life are no longer around, right? People's lives expand and people move away from each other and people grow away from each other. And if that's true of people who you thought were going to be there forever, it can be true of the people that you are married to. And so if you know that as a fact for your friends and you maintain your friendships, it's like you ever be like, oh man, I haven't talked to John in a while. Let me get that brother a call and reconnect with them. It's the same way. You've got to reconnect with the person that you sleep in a bed with, right? Just because they're there with you every single day doesn't mean that they're not going through changes and changing the type of the person that they are right in front of you. And you've got to make an effort to make those changes. So I think again, the statement "marriage is work" is very very true. But again, the follow up statement to that is that the work that you do at the beginning is different from the work that you do later on in life. And last but not least, I think that you have to, and this is going to sound really weird because I'm here talking about like how you work on each other and try to collaborate with each other, but you have to have something that is validating about your life outside of your mate. What does that mean? I think that if you are in a situation where the only thing that makes you feel good about yourself is the fact that your mate is telling you that you're good about yourself, is a dangerous proposition. Uh, if you don't have something that makes you feel good and gives you intrinsic validation, then you're setting up a situation for when that is now not there from your mate, you have a void in your life, right? So whether you're talking about a hobby, whether you're talking about a organization that is important to you, or a passion, you have to find something that is important to you. Because why is this important? So as I mentioned before, you're not always going to be on the same page. You're not always going to have a great, you two are always not going to be happy about that particular day, that particular week. They're going to be rifts, right? If the only way that you get personal validation, if the only thing that makes you happy is your mate making you happy, when those times come, there is nothing to make you happy because you all are bumping heads at that particular time, you're going to start to resent that person, right? You're going to start to resent that person for who they are, because now the thing that is making you happy is making you unhappy, and you have no other thing to either distract you or to make you happy outside of your relationship. And so it's important that you have that, right? And right now, people are probably like, well, of course you do. Like, I have my job. Well, does your job really make you happy? It's like, or I have my kids. What happens when your kids stop making you happy? Trust me, your kids are going to not make you happy a couple of times. Um, so I think that it is really important that you have those intrinsic validation points for yourself, so that when time comes and you're having a bump heads moment with your particular mate, you can be like, all right, let me focus on this thing over here right now. That'll make me feel better about myself. Whether it's crocheting or volunteering for your local organization or biking or or exercise or something along those lines, you need to have something that does not involve your mate, that makes you happy, because you will need that a couple of times. You will need that in order to make sure that you are centered in your life. And this is true even if your mate's not making you angry. Even if you're not having a rough time with your mate, you need something that makes you happy outside of them. Uh, the person that you are married to should not be the thing that keeps you afloat. It can be one of the things that helps you to keep afloat. Don't hear me saying that your mate shouldn't be the person that's helping you, but it should not be the main thing that's keeping you afloat. You have to have some other things that are making you happy intrinsically. So that's my point. That's my marriage tips. 14 years in, I might actually know what I'm talking about, right? Um, all right, let's take a hard pivot. And so one of the things that I have been talking to a friend of mine about is, with all of the things that are happening, and this is on the whole racial justice thing. Um, with all of the things that are happening, one of the things that has been constant as I am looking at it is that millennials are fed up with the old guard and the way that they have been running this country, and the idioms or the principles that they have been putting forward. They've been completely disenchanted with the way that the generations before them have run this country. So we're talking about the Gen Xers, the baby boomers. Millennials are tired of them, right? And so and they're like, why are we still doing this whole racism thing? This is really dumb. Um, but because they tend to not be in positions of power, that voice doesn't get heard as much as the people who are barking loudly. They're getting heard in the protests because primarily those are the people who are moving the dial. The millennials and the Gen Zs are the people who are moving the dial in this current climate. Um, and I think, and this is going to hurt me to say this, the millennials are probably going to be the generation that saves us all. The millennials were the first generation that were raised by baby boomers. And baby boomers were some of the first people that were going to college and were the first people that had their ideals challenged, the old ideals challenged. And a lot of times they pass that down onto their millennial children. All people are equal. Try not to be biased. Don't use bias in making decisions. And so millennials grew up with this mindset that there needs to be there can be a world where everybody is equal. Um, there is a mindset, there is an idea um, that Abrams came up with, or is purporting, when looking at anti-racism. that all racist policies, all racism comes from um, a defending policies that are designed to keep resources and power in the seats where they exist. So what does that mean? So I have a bunch of stuff. I want to keep a bunch of stuff, and I want to make sure that those people over there don't get the stuff that I have. Um, and so I create a whole bunch of policies in order to say those people can't have my stuff, and those people can't have my stuff, and you can't have my stuff. And so I've created all these policies. And then when you look at the policies, they are extremely biased and extremely prejudicial. And so, in order to validate my prejudicial thinking, my prejudicial policies, I now create racism, or I now create any kind of ism, so sexism, racism, classism, to say the reasons that these policies are necessary is because those people are less than. Those people are not as worthy as I am. And so the racism comes to validate the policies. The policies are there to make sure that the power structure and the resource structure stays exactly the way that it is. And so racism and sexism and all of the isms are based on a desire to keep power structures, a desire to keep resources and resource structures exactly the same way that they are. Um, it is also racism is also based was emphasized to diminish the existence of classism, or the effects of classism, because at a certain point in time in this country there were far more, and there still is, there were far more poor people than there were rich people, or there were far more poor people than there were landowners. And racism was used to level out that playing field, because what was starting to happen was that all of the non-landowners were coming together and saying, well, if all of us get together, there are far more of us than there are of you. And if we get together and we start thinking alike, then we can overthrow the rich. And there were examples of that in Europe. So exactly what happened with the French, and exactly what happened with a couple of totalitarian and monarchical societies in Europe. And so the United States was like, well, let's add in the layer of race on there, saying that all people of European background were better than people from African background. And that separated the classes of poor. So now you were black poor and you were white poor, but because you were white, you were higher than the black poor. And that's the basis of racism. And so all of those things were put into place so that the rich could stay rich and the powerful could stay powerful. It's pretty much this most simplistic way of explaining it. Why do I think the millennials are the generation that's going to save us? Well, the millennials have long been complaining that they have not got any jobs. They've come into their professional lives being saddled with unprecedented debt from colleges, and the job market was horrible, and they're not able to build any kind of build any kind of wealth. And those that have not been benefiting from generational wealth have been complaining for a very, very long time that there is a real dearth of opportunities for millennials, right? So we're suddenly back to where the vast majority of the country does not have, and this is the whole 1%, and the whole Bernie Sanders idea, and this is why millennials gravitated toward Bernie Sanders, because he spoke their language. And so now we are at the point where everybody's saying, all millennials saying, like, well, none of us have any money, right? Black, white, Asian, nobody has any money. And if nobody has any money, and there is no power structure within that generation to keep to keep a standard, right? To hold on to, and none of the people in that generation have have as much access to power as the generations before them, because those generations are still not coming up over those seats. That generation doesn't have a reason to buy into the policies that enforce the maintenance of power structure and resources, because they don't have any and they don't have access to it. So they're just as pissed about it as people who have been traditionally disenfranchised and traditionally kept out of being able to access power and resources. And so everybody's in the same boat. All millennials are in the same boat. And I think that, coupled with the fact that their parents have raised them telling them that, bias is bad and racism is bad and sexism is bad and all the rest of that stuff, coupled with the fact that it's like we're all in the same boat. Um, yes, even Zennials are struggling and stuck. I agree. I think that this is the generation that says, look, man, this whole idea of me keeping you down so that I can have more is ridiculous, because even when you are kept down, I still don't have more. Like, why don't we figure out a way where we can all access, we can all have? And you've heard me say multiple times that this is a country with an embarrassment of riches, an embarrassment of wealth, and an embarrassment of opportunities. And we do not have to snuff somebody's light out in order for ours to shine brightly, right? And so I think that the millennial generation, when they finally pull it all together, will be the generation that saves us all. And I think that that is a generation that will finally look around and say that, you know what, y'all just step over to that side, y'all step over to that side. We're gonna take it from here, and we're gonna do this a whole different way. Um, you're seeing it in the marches. You're seeing that everybody is speaking in the same voice, even though they come from different backgrounds. And I think that this is the beginning of a time when people will start to recognize all the things that we have been saying for generations and generations, that really skin color should not be the thing that separates us. So that's my pitch for millennials. High five to all the millennials. Yeah, I said it. Millennials are dope. I don't I don't need y'all coming back to me and pushing that in my face, okay? Thank you. Um, all right. So let's I have to, we're getting ready to come to the end, and I have to talk about your boy in in the White House. Um, and just in general, I have been flabbergasted by the fact that we are literally living in a time when there are no rules anymore. We're living in a time when there are people are just doing whatever they want to, and people are living in and doing whatever that they want to, but not paying attention to, and people are not paying attention to um, any of the long-standing rules that were established in this country so that we are a civilized union. Um, it's mind-numbing, and it is really scary to live through what we're living through right now. Um, even we could start with the president commuting the sentence of Roger Stone. Convicted felon will not serve a day in prison, and nobody blinked, right? Um, he had a, not Roger Stone, but the president had a press conference in the Rose Garden and openly campaigned in the Rose Garden, openly. You know, talked about talked about Biden, pulled out a sheet of paper and and read from his notes. Oh my God, it was the most embarrassing thing ever. But complete violation of the rules that govern public officials campaigning at publicly funded engagements. You can't call a press conference as the president and then have a campaign speech. You just can't, right? It again, mind numbing, completely mind numbing. And I think one of the problems is that um, he's done so much about to break the rules, and people have, and he's gotten away with so many different things, whether it is the Mueller report, or the impeachment. And he was impeached, but he wasn't removed from office. So at this point in time, he's like, well, there's nothing that anybody can do to get rid of me, or there's nothing that anybody can do um, that will shock, that nothing that I can do that will shock anybody, right? And I think the other side of it is more dangerous. I think people have gotten so tired of all of the different ways that he has violated the American way of life and the American government system and the office of the president, that people have stopped even bringing it up anymore, right? Um, when he had the press conference and he started talking about Biden, and it was clear that he was making this into a campaign, a campaign slogan, or it's like a campaign rally. Um, the news outlets covered it. They didn't switch to it, and you've seen news outlets is like, all right, president said what he needed to say, and he's still talking, but he's now moved away. Let's cut back to our regularly scheduled programming. They stayed with it. Nobody cares anymore. And people, I feel like people don't care because they're thinking it's like, what are we going to do? We tried the full impeachment thing, right? We've tried everything that we possibly can in order to remove this man from office or to restrict his powers, and um, and nothing has worked. And it's all kinds of crazy things. I don't know if you noticed this, but the White House has now removed the CDC from the reporting structure from hospitals when it comes to COVID-19. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, no longer gets updates directly from the hospitals. The CDC now has to go through the White House to get its data so that it can properly do its job. No? Yeah, that's what I thought. It's I don't know where we are anymore. It is so disheartening and so scary when you see certain things happening right in front of your face. And when a government body like the CDC, which should be nonpartisan and is there for the health of the nation, is being cut off by the knees in order for this particular administration to control the narrative and control the messaging that comes out with a disease that is killing people at a rapid rate. There are hundreds of thousands of people who are infected with this disease every single day. And the White House has said, yeah, no, we're not going to tell the CDC until we get the data first, and then we will send the information to the CDC. We'll send what they need to know from our offices. I may or may not be right, but I'm pretty sure that the White House and this current administration is not chock full of scientists who are able to properly discern what the numbers are. And I don't know if I'm missing the notifications about this. I don't know if I am blind to the rationale why they would do this. Maybe the CDC is doing a horrible job. I could be completely wrong on this. I have a strange feeling that I'm not. And it is very, very scary when you see stuff like this happening, and you see um, there seem to be any recourse uh, for people who are noticing that this is wrong, right? Like, oh, okay, well, he just took the powers away from the CDC. That's wrong. Now what? Right? And so that's where we are. It's like, oh my God, like who's doing the checking? Who's doing the checks and balances? Who's doing the people? Who are the people who are making sure that he is not, and he and the rest of the administration, because it's not just him, right? He and the rest of the administration is not taking this country for a ride and doing just whatever they feel like it. Um, and I'm still trying to figure out who those checks and balances are. All right. We are at the end of time. Hey, Melissa. Yes, Melissa. He knows exactly what he's doing. Heath Leary. Uh, Thank you for peeking in your conference call. That is our lives now. All we are on is a bunch of conference calls, um, and uh, and thank you, Wilma, for my happy anniversary. Congratulations on still being alive. That is the best goal of being in a marriage, making sure that your mate does not kill you. Anyway, this has been fun as always. Thank you so much. If you want to hear me talk some more, on Saturday we do a photography workshop on our we do a photography workshop on Instagram. So check that out Saturdays at 5 o'clock. Also, last but not least, please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe. I could use some subscribers. I want to just try to make sure that all of these things end up on the YouTube channel. Eventually, hopefully, we'll just move that to a full out show on YouTube, and we can start to make things move, right? So go to my YouTube channel, Google my name, Hayden Greene. I'm not the guy with his shirt off from the other Hayden Greene that should come up when you Google Hayden Greene, and subscribe, right? Other than that, stay well, be good to each other, eat well, and stay safe. I'll see you next week, Thursday at noon. Bye, y'all.